AZ-900 Lesson 2, Cloud Deployment Models, Public, Private, Hybrid. Hi, and welcome back to this AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals training. In the previous lesson, you learned what cloud computing is, its key benefits, and the main service models, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. In this lesson, we will focus on a different but very important topic for the AZ-900 exam. Cloud Deployment Models. By the end of this video, you will be able to explain the difference between public, private, and hybrid cloud deployments, and you will be able to recognize which model is being described in exam-style scenarios. Here is what we will cover in this lesson. First, we will define what a cloud deployment model is. Second, we will describe the characteristics of public, private, and hybrid cloud deployments. Third, we will look at practical examples and exam tips to help you identify the correct model in a question. Let's start with the definition. A cloud deployment model describes where your cloud resources are located, who owns and manages the infrastructure, and who can access the services. In other words, while service models like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS describe what type of service you consume, deployment models describe how and where those services are deployed and made available. For the AZ-900 exam, the key deployment models you must know are public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. Let's start with the public cloud. Public cloud means that the cloud provider owns and operates the infrastructure, and the services are delivered over the internet to many customers. The infrastructure is shared between multiple organizations, in a multi-tenant environment, but each customer's resources and data are logically isolated. With a public cloud, you do not own the hardware. You simply subscribe to services or pay for what you use. And the provider is responsible for managing and maintaining the underlying infrastructure. Examples of public cloud providers include Microsoft Azure, of course, and also providers like Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud Platform. The public cloud has several important characteristics. First, it is highly scalable. You can quickly increase or decrease resources when demand changes, without having to buy new hardware. Second, it follows a consumption-based model. You pay for what you use, which can be very cost-effective for variable or unpredictable workloads. Third, it requires minimal infrastructure management from your side. The provider takes care of data centers, physical servers, networking, power, cooling, and many platform services. Typical use cases for the public cloud include hosting customer-facing web applications and APIs, development and test environments, startups and new projects where speed and flexibility are important, workloads with seasonal or unpredictable traffic. In AZ-900 questions, if you see a scenario where a company wants to avoid buying hardware, wants to reduce management overhead, and is comfortable using shared infrastructure operated by a cloud provider, the correct answer is often public cloud. Now, let's look at the private cloud. A private cloud is a cloud environment that is used by a single organization only. It can be hosted in the organization's own data center, or hosted by a third party, but the key idea is that the infrastructure is dedicated to one customer. Unlike the public cloud, a private cloud is a single-tenant environment. You are not sharing the underlying hardware with other organizations. Private clouds provide more control and customization. The organization can define its own security policies, compliance controls, network configuration, and platform settings. However, this also means that the organization usually has to manage and maintain more of the infrastructure, or pay a provider to do it on its behalf. There is typically more upfront cost and more operational responsibility compared to using only the public cloud. Common use cases for private cloud include industries with very strict regulatory or compliance requirements, workloads that process highly sensitive data, organizations that have already made large investments in their own data centers and want to keep using them, scenarios where full control over data location and infrastructure is required. In the context of Azure, technologies like Azure Stack can be used to bring Azure services into a private environment, closer to the organization's own data center. In AZ-900 questions, if you see a scenario where a company wants cloud-like capabilities but does not want to share infrastructure with other organizations, or must keep workloads inside its own data center for compliance reasons, The correct answer is often private cloud. Now let's move to the hybrid cloud model. A hybrid cloud combines elements of both public and private clouds. In a hybrid model, some workloads run in the public cloud, while others run in a private cloud or on-premises data center. Data and applications can move between these environments when needed. The idea is to get the best of both worlds: the control and compliance of a private environment, and the flexibility and scalability of the public cloud. Hybrid cloud is especially powerful when an organization wants to keep sensitive data and critical systems on premises or in a private cloud. Use the public cloud to handle variable traffic, test environments, or less sensitive workloads. Gradually migrate applications to the cloud instead of moving everything at once. Implement disaster recovery to the cloud while keeping primary systems on premises. For example, a company might run its internal financial systems in a private cloud, but host its customer-facing website and mobile APIs in Azure. During peak seasons, the website can scale out in the public cloud, while sensitive data remains in the private environment. This is a classic hybrid cloud scenario. Hybrid cloud also introduces extra complexity. You need to manage connections between environments, keep identities and security controls consistent, and monitor workloads across both public and private infrastructures. However, for many organizations, this trade-off is worth it because hybrid cloud supports both compliance and agility. For the AZ-900 exam, hybrid cloud is often the correct answer when the question mentions using both on-premises infrastructure and cloud services. The organization wants to keep some workloads on premises but also use the public cloud. The scenario talks about a gradual migration to the cloud instead of a full move. The question describes cloud bursting, where extra capacity is handled by the public cloud during peak demand. Whenever you see use existing on-premises investments and also use Azure for additional capacity, you should immediately think about the hybrid cloud deployment model. Let's quickly compare these three models side by side. In a public cloud, the infrastructure is owned and operated by the cloud provider. Resources are shared by many customers in a multi-tenant environment. You pay based on consumption and have minimal infrastructure management responsibilities. In a private cloud, the infrastructure is dedicated to a single organization. You have higher levels of control and customization. You usually have higher cost and more management responsibilities. In a hybrid cloud, you combine public and private environments. You keep some workloads or data on premises or in a private cloud, and use the public cloud for others. You gain flexibility and scalability, but you also have to manage a more complex environment. Now, let's relate this back to the exam. In many AZ-900 questions, you will see short scenarios such as: a company wants to minimize the time spent managing hardware and is comfortable using shared infrastructure operated by a cloud provider. This describes public cloud. A government agency must run workloads in a dedicated environment to meet strict compliance requirements, and cannot share infrastructure with other organizations. This describes private cloud. A financial company wants to keep its core banking system on premises, but use Azure for customer-facing web applications and for handling peak traffic. This describes hybrid cloud. If you practice matching scenarios like these with the correct deployment model, you will be well prepared for this part of the AZ-900 exam. Let's recap what you learned in this lesson. You learned that a cloud deployment model describes where your cloud resources are located, who owns and manages the infrastructure, and who can access the services. You saw that the public cloud is owned and operated by a provider and shared among many customers. The private cloud is dedicated to a single organization and offers more control and customization. The hybrid cloud combines public and private environments, allowing data and applications to move between them. You also saw how to recognize each model in exam-style scenarios based on key phrases and requirements. In the next lesson, we will continue building your AZ-900 foundation by exploring other core cloud concepts and how they apply specifically to Microsoft Azure. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.